Welcome to the Legendarium Green Team. I'm your host, Kyptan, and with me today are Eradandis.
Hi.
Ashaman.
Hi, hello everyone.
And Hurinfan.
Hello.
Today we'll be discussing Lord of Light, the 1967 science fantasy classic by Roger Zelazny. It received the Hugo Award for Best Novel in 1968 and was nominated for the Nebula Award in the same category. It's one of my favorite books of all time, and I'm thrilled to be able to talk about it with all of you. We're going to give some quick thoughts on the novel as a whole before we dive into spoiler territory, but it's going to be hard to talk about this book without getting pretty specific. I'll warn you when that's about to happen, and then you can just turn off the rest of the episode if you haven't read yet. Unless you don't mind spoilers, in which case, listen on. So, Lord of Light is a book which blends science fiction with fantasy, telling the tale of a far-flung colony from vanished Urath, where humans have conquered the native inhabitants and established themselves as gods, specifically the Hindu gods, and used the rest of the world's population as a, quote, combination game preserve and whorehouse, end quote. It explores the nature of divinity, technology, humanity, and dominion, among others. It does all of this in the language, almost in the verse of, an oral tale of mythological fable. So I'd like to open up with some general impressions, an overall rating, and whether you feel this book deserves the critical acclaim it garnered. Since Eradandis was the most enthusiastic on getting this episode recorded, I'm going to let him start.
This book is a classic and should be considered in the same vein as people consider Lord of the Rings for fantasy or the Foundation series for science fiction. Roger Zelazny with Lord of Light created a new genre which everybody uses today, which is mixing them both, mixing science fiction and fantasy, mixing the modern with fable, and just stirring it together and having something new come up.
So I'm just going to say you're going to give this a 5 stars.
If that's all I can give it, then yeah. If it's
sure, give it 6, give it 10, give it 11, whatever you feel like.
It is one of the finest books I've ever read. Roger Zelazny really is, and
he absolutely is. When I read it, I'm reminded of like the Iliad and the Odyssey.
That's a great comparison. It really is. He's a phenomenal writer, and he was at the top of his game in this book.
Ash?
Yeah, I will just echo a lot of what Eradandis said. This was an incredible read. It was my first time reading it. But yeah, no, just 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5, all of the superlatives you can possibly ascribe to a book, basically. It's very similar in the in that it is a fantastical retelling of a fantastical telling of a science fiction narrative to the Book of the New Sun, another series or book, whatever you want to call it, that I love as well. This is definitely a masterpiece. Yeah, it should be considered a classic. Everyone should read it if you're interested in sci-fi or fantasy at all.
Yeah, I'd be all for making it a required book in schools. Huron?
Out of fear of sounding too, echoey, I agree completely. So I'm sure our listeners,
that's a wrap,
if any of our
boys.
listeners heard our first episode, they'll know that this was one of my underappreciated fantasy books, and this is my second time reading it, maybe third. I 2 according to Goodreads, and I enjoy it immensely, and it was even better this time that I read it because I took copious notes, and there's just so much that you could take out of it, philosophy, and the prose especially stood out to me this time. 5 stars, whatever. It's great.
And I would just add to it that it's timeless. It really is. I mean, to some of the questions that you're going to ask, it really is timeless, and it doesn't matter what time period you're in. It's still fresh.
I've read this book probably 4 times. This makes my 5th reread, or my 5th read. And I remember just when I started it, I was like, okay, was coming off of a bad book, a really bad book, and if any of you read the Jade City episode, if any of you listen to the Jade City episode, you'll know which one I'm talking about. And I was very excited to get to Lord of Light, and I was telling Little Red Book that I thought that reading this would make me come out the other end a better person, and I think it has. It always brings me something new that I can apply to the situation I find myself, no matter what time I'm reading it in. It's chock full of those level 3 moments.
It really is. I mean, you can read it just as a story, and it's fine as a story, but it multiplies every time every time it's read at level 2, level 3, at all those levels. You guys, this is my 8th time reading this book, and I feel like I could, as soon as we're done, pick it back up and read it again.
Yeah, there's no way I'm reading this as little as 8 times over the course of my life.
You might.
when
It helps that it's short, right?
It does help that it's short. I read this book aloud once to a Discord book club. I love it that much. When my sister went out to Powell's Books and she was like, "What book do you want me to bring back?" I was like, "Lord of Light, please." So I got Lord of Light for Christmas. I was very happy. Okay, so now we're gonna dive into spoiler territory. Just going to go there first thing off after our initial impressions. Readers, listeners, if you don't want to continue, turn it off now. Let's go through each of the 7 chapters, as Eradandis has suggested, and go through the themes of rebirth, power, faith, inner self, not accepting death, and then lost death, and then joy/belief. And how the book is about change versus stasis. And do you like how Zelazny approached all of those things in the book? I know that's just one question, and it could be the entire pass, but let's try and keep it relatively brief. Maybe go for your favorites of each of those themes.
Can you tell
Kieran,
one
you
more
go
time?
first.
Okay, so it's in the Google Doc. Each chapter has a level 3 motif. So in the first book, it's all about rebirth. It's about Sam coming back from heaven and figuring out how to deify himself, how to ground himself again in the flesh, how to unfollow the way of the Buddha so that he can again fight for his accelerationist ideals. It's about what does it mean to be a human or to be a being of essential immortality, but still be embodied. And then the second book is all about power. It's about how Sam was a lord in a city and he had retainers and he had a hypnotist on standby where he could force people to impersonate him just for a jape.
I'll
and
take
then-
the third one.
The third one
love
of
the third one's my
faith
favorite.
in
By far
the
my favorite.
forest, in the grove of trees, where he taught the Buddha. And then the Buddha taught him. Sure. That's a beautiful one with Rild and the assassin who became Buddha. Lovely story. And then 4, the inner self, the struggle between Sam and the demons in the Hellwell, and Taraka, who rode his skin, and how their essences became commingled, and how this being of passionate desires awakened passions that Sam didn't really fully believe that he had to that extent, and how they trade back, and how Sam taught the demon guilt. Then you have 5, not accepting death. You have Sam fighting while he is a captive in heaven, when he's under lock and guard by actual gods, and he conspires to escape. You have this futile struggle, which ends in him being devoured by wolves and then burned on an altar. And then you have 6, loss and death, where he reincarnates, where gods die, where the creator god, and like by this point you've kind of almost come to believe in the deific powers of the gods, given Yama's speeches on the subject. And then in 7, you have joy and belief. You have his eventual and climactic triumph, though not without cost. And then you have him kind of vanishing into the west, into the east, however you want to call it. You have the classic end of the Tolkien story where the hero figures disappear from the world, but their works and their actions live on.
So I need to pick one of those and talk about it.
Pick one of them. Talk about it. How do you feel?
Okay. I think the one that stood out most to me is the story with the demons. Well, I think that was chapter 4, right? So he
Yep.
tries to a long time ago before the story, he had, I guess, subdued all the demons who were actually the original inhabitants of the world that the first, what are the first peoples called?
The first.
Okay, the first.
The indigenous demons, the Rakasha.
No, I
Is
mean
that
the
what you
first
meant?
humans. It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
the first.
Just as the first.
So Sam was fairly famous for inside the pantheon for subduing the demons, and he goes down there and he tries to make a deal with the most powerful one, and the demon does it, but then he backstabs him and possesses him. And through this whole time, Sam is just kind of sitting in the back of his own head, watching things that is happening. And eventually, he starts participating even just a little bit. And most of the stuff is just really, really bad stuff: rapes and murder, and just the really most terrible parts of humanity. And Sam, like you said, came to find out that he didn't quite hate it as much as he thought he did. And one of my favorite, actually, I think my favorite part of the story is when he puts the Buddha's curse on the demon. And I have a quote here. Maybe I don't. So I'll edit this part out. I wrote it down, but my notes are so hard to find. I can't find it. It was so beautiful written, though. So he curses the demon, and he forces guilt upon him. And I think that says that guilt is what keeps us from being as terrible as we need to be. And that guilt is just an important part of how we live. And that there really isn't a lot separating us from what we really are, the source of all the evils. But the only thing keeping it from us is the little slice of humanity telling us not to. That was my favorite chapter, I suppose, or theme of the story.
And I like the idea that we all contain different amounts of each of those things. Some of us have more guilt than other. Some of us have more demons than others. But we all possess both of them in equal amounts. Or, sorry, not in equal amounts. We all possess both of them to varying amounts. And just the existence of them, the omnipresent nature of them is the important part. I'm sure you might have to fight different amounts to assert one or the other, but it's in everyone. And so everyone can take away from that.
I thought it was very important in that chapter where Sam had a recognition of, oh, wait, it's always been inside me. And then I'm actually enjoying it. And I thought that was a very, very powerful moment. That's where, I mean, he's speaking to humanity. And that's where he comes up with the curse, the guilt to put on the Rakasha.
Do you think it was a real curse? Or do you think the Rakasha really just, by spending so much time with Sam, actually, I don't know, took that guilt into him and understood it?
I think Sam used his electrodirection to purposefully merge their souls more.
Well, I think we should give a little bit of explanation. So a lot of these immortals, these quasi-deific beings, they all have certain attributes. They all have certain abilities outside the norm. And in Sam's case, he has this ability to basically control energy. And that's what we believe may have allowed him to give being a pure energy guilt.
See, I got something different from there. I got that it was just the demon having inhabited his soul and shared his entire being basically with Sam that gave him his guilt. Like, as the demon was impressing himself on Sam, so was Sam impressing himself upon the demon.
I think that with a less powerful soul, the demon would have just completely overridden the host.
I agree. Yeah.
And
that's why it's called Great Souled Sam. Eh?
Sam has a lot of names.
He has a lot of names. I do love the epithets that every deity or figure gets in these books. Even like John Olveg gets some epithets. He who sailed the Sea of Stars. Sure, let's do it.
Yeah, so Sam, also known as Sam, Mahasamatman, Kalkin, Manjushri, Siddhartha, Tathagata, Binder, Maitreya, the Enlightened One, Buddha, or Great Souled Sam.
The Lord of Light.
The Lord of Light, forgot that one.
Well, I think that's a translation of Maitreya, but yeah.
Yeah, I believe so. I think that's correct.
Yep. But the epithets for the gods really make you remember what these beings are. And if we listen to Yama, and Yama is probably the most intelligent person in the whole story.
But also the most immature.
For sure, one of the most immature. One of the least willing to take responsibility for his actions.
Exactly. I mean, remember he was what, 15 or 16 when he had his first transference before he had his first new body. So I thought that was a very interesting choice by Zelazny to make sure that you had the strongest, smartest, most capable person in the entire book also be the most immature. I thought that was a very interesting choice. What do you guys think that meant?
He was stunted. He was emotionally stunted because he was separated from his childhood at age 15, and he never got to have the like real adolescent phase or young adult phase. He was just thrust from one into the other, from a 15-year-old man into a 50-year-old man. And I honestly found a lot of similarities to myself in that. One thing I complain about sometimes is that LGBT kids never really get to have an adolescence, because as soon as they become aware of their sexual orientation, they have to either try and hide it, or ignore it, or actively work against it. And so they don't get early relationships and early lessons that you would learn from having like I never had a boyfriend in high school or middle school or whatever. I didn't get a boyfriend until after I was done with college. And so I had to learn all of that a little bit later in my life. Yama still seemed like he was going through his first relationship with Kali.
Yeah,
yeah, he really did. Yeah.
Yeah, Yama learned. Go ahead.
He's an interesting contrast to Sam, who's the Lord of Light. Like, Yama's the Lord of Dark. Sam he has all this maturity, all this wisdom, and he's a con artist at the same time. You don't know when he's telling the truth and when he's BSing, but he does. But he always leaves it vague, and so I think Yama is intended to be the direct contrast to Sam in terms of emotional growth.
And I love how Sam even lies about like how he's not serious about Buddhism, and up until like pretty close to the end, he doesn't impress upon others how much he was impressed by Rild.
That chapter is by far my favorite of the whole book, because that's where Sam changed. That's where you saw it's in the past relative to the story, but that's where Sam changed. It was in that third chapter with Rild, when he faced Yama, and I think the consequences of that is what changed Sam down the path that he eventually ended
Why
up.
don't we go into that? Let's talk about your favorite chapter.
Okay. So chapter 3 is where Sam has decided that, there's two camps in the world. There's the people who are already who are already deific beings who want to keep the status quo. So they want religion as stasis, to keep everything the same. And religion is going to be a mechanism to control the populace. And Sam, he wants to bring technology to the world. He thinks that people should be allowed to learn new things, whereas the other camp does not. So Sam, who at the time claims he doesn't believe in Buddhism at all, picks it up as a likely candidate to spread to the world. So he fakes being Buddha. He starts spreading the teachings of Buddha throughout the world, and that upsets the gods because now change is occurring and they don't want this change. So they send this assassin. The assassin's name is Rill, and he comes to kill Sam on orders of his goddess, Kali. And he's a true believer. And I think that's key. He's a true believer. And Sam, through persuasion, without ever lifting a finger, convinces Rill to not fight. And Rill eventually becomes a student of Buddhism, and begins doing more and more of the teachings. And then eventually Yama is sent to kill Sam. And this is our first introduction of Yama in direct antagonism to Sam. And Rill, at this point, he's changed his name to Sugata. He knows that Yama's coming. He goes and faces Yama. And there's this epic fight, and Sugata dies. Rill dies. Yama kills him. And then when Yama then confronts Sam, Sam's like, if you came to kill Buddha, you've already accomplished it. The man you killed, Sugata, he was actually Buddha. And I loved it because it said so much about faith and belief. Even if I'm still kind of squirrely about it one way or the other, I thought it was a really powerful message, because here you had Sam, who claims he doesn't believe in any of this stuff, that he's full of it. He ends up with somebody who's a true believer, who actually believes everything that's being said, adopts it, and then becomes the embodiment of what Sam claims is nothing. And I thought that was powerful. It was a message saying, like, it doesn't necessarily matter who the messenger is. It's the message and how you receive it. And that was also shown by how Yama responded to Sam. And you can see how Sam manipulates Yama by getting him pissed off, getting him really upset, and then using that against him. And that's actually one of my favorite parts of the book, is that you have these huge flowery phrases where Sam goes through this soliloquy to Yama, and then Yama goes, you're full of it. And then Sam goes, yeah, do you have a cigarette? It's kind of like it's a break in the momentum to kind of go, here's some modernism in this fable. And that's kind of where you get the mixing of the sci-fi and the fantasy, but in dialogue. So anyways, that's my favorite chapter.
I do love the code switching between the narration and the description, and between the dialogue in moments like that, especially, where you can see which people are being authentic, but at the same time you can see the great import of their actions, whether they recognize it themselves or not. Someone afterward has come through and written a history of it.
So you said,
I agree.
Era, you said that you think Sam really embraced Buddhism, and that I disagree. I take Sam at his words, and I think Sam really just used Buddhism as a tool for his accelerationism goals. I know he does embrace parts of the Buddhist faith, and especially seen through his actions, but his violence, I think, stands in a stark contrast to the teachings of the Buddha, and especially Rilde. So, to our listeners who don't know, the story is told in not a chronological way. So the story starts out with him being reincarnated.
Chapters 1 and 7 are in order, but the rest of the book is a flashback.
Yeah.
The flashback leading up to chapter 1.
Yep.
So one of my favorite parts, I'm going to read this quote. So Sam at the end of chapter 1 says, he's very, very, very angry. I shall tear these stars out from the heavens, he said, and hurl them in the faces of the gods, if this be necessary. I shall blaspheme in every temple throughout the land. I shall take lives as a fisherman takes fish by net, if this be necessary. I shall mount me again up to the celestial city, though every step be flame or a naked sword, and the way be guarded by tigers. One day will the gods look down from heaven and see me upon the stair, bringing them the gift they fear most. That day will the new yuga begin. And I think he's motivated primarily by two things. First, well, three things, I guess. Guilt for being one of the first, and the world, him not doing much to help the world. Two, he's motivated really by wanting to help the people. And three, by revenge, especially in chapters 1 and 7. So I think he embraces parts of the Buddhist faith, but I don't think that he thinks he's the Buddha, because obviously he doesn't. And I don't think that he is a true Buddhist.
I find it interesting that you take him at his word. That you take him at his word when he claims not to be Buddhist, but you don't when he claims to be. And I get that he's talking about the con, but I think in that, when he's talking about all of the destruction that he will wreak in pursuit of his aims, I think he was doing that partly as a show to Yama and Ratri and Tak. I think that he was trying to put on a show of strength because they were trying to convince him to ground himself again in the world, and he wanted to pretend that he was slightly more ready than he actually was. And I think that all throughout the book, after Sugata, that he actually believed, maybe not completely, maybe not entirely, but he did believe in the Buddhist teachings that he heard. And that maybe he declared that he wasn't worthy enough to follow their path, maybe. That maybe he had to do some dirty work to be the hero that people needed, but not the one they deserved. But I do think that he had internalized quite a bit of the Buddhist faith, even if he fought against its aims at times, even if he used its people as a weapon.
I would say he left it ambiguous, and you can see that in chapter 1. Because in chapter 1, Yama kills a god in front of a whole bunch of Buddhists. And they're panicking. They're like, oh crap. When they scan these guys, they're going to know who we are, where we are. What are we going to do? Sam, you've got to get us out of this. And Sam's like, all right, I got this. Don't worry about it. And so he spends this fabulous Buddhist teaching about the meaning of nothingness and the meaning of self. And it's very, if you believe in Buddhism and all that, it's actually very, very moving. It's amazing. And then at the end of it, Tak said, so wow, that was great. And Sam's like, yeah, I made it all up. I don't know.
Yep.
Whatever. That's literally, he's like, whatever. It's all BS I made up, right? So.
Does anyone else love Sam's sermons?
Great.
I loved Sam's sermons. Yeah, they were excellent. I'd actually like to read his response to, like what he actually says in response to Tak there. Just give me a moment to get it up. I'm very gullible when it comes to my own words. I believe everything I say, though I know I'm a liar. I think that really speaks to the contradictions within Sam. He's a Buddhist that fights. He commits violent acts. He does terrible things. He's using this cynically, though he does, in fact, like it has more of an impression on him than he lets on. In chapter 7, someone asks him, why did you pick Buddhism? And he says, oh, I couldn't have picked Islam, and someone else already taken Christianity, and Hindu was taken, so Buddhism, I was curious to see what happened. But there are people in the story who call him Lord of Light, and especially there's a jaybird who was once a poet who prophesied that he would die the day he saw the Lord of Light, and he comes up to him and says, "You are the Lord of Light." So I think Sam is, in a lot of ways, more and less than what he lets on. He is, he's a con man, but at the same time, he is a savior.
So why do you say savior?
I say savior because he saves mankind from their squalor, from the gods. He sets them free from their slavery and their caste system.
From the growing immortal oppression. From an oppression that may truly never have an end if someone didn't do something. And if they didn't do it then, when that specific moment of weakness, because they were only growing stronger.
Yeah.
But does that make him? Well, no, I disagree. They were not growing stronger. They were growing progressively weaker, but chapter to chapter. Every time Sam lost, he weakened the gods. So that by the last chapter, it was easy pickings for him by then.
Before Sam took action, they were only growing stronger.
Yeah, but Sam took action in book 2, or in the chapter 2.
Yep.
Yeah, that's when they're at the height of their power. But then Sam progressively weakened them and sacrificed his own life, not once, but twice, achieving Nirvana one time because of that. But if it wasn't for Sam, then one can imagine that it would either be they would be stuck in the awful system that they had at the beginning, or under Nirti's heel in his very fascist Christianity.
That was one of the weirdest examples of Christianity I've ever seen in a book.
Yeah.
But go on, Era.
No, I was about to say, I'm not sure I'd say savior. I'd say Prometheus. He brought fire. He brought technology to the world. I don't know if that necessarily makes him a savior, but I think I'll agree with the breaking the chains of slavery. But I don't know about savior. That's an interesting question.
I think you can be both.
Because,
I think Prometheus was a savior. Even in the Christian Christ sense, because he was sacrificed and punished for his, not punished, but he was punished for his doing.
Honestly, his punishment, I think, worse than the crucifixion.
Yeah, I would agree. Having your liver torn out every day, that's pretty bad.
So, Ash, what's your favorite chapter?
My favorite chapter, it was actually chapter 3, but let's pretend it's chapter 7 for the purposes of the discussion. I'm a sucker for bittersweet endings, and this one did it very well, in my opinion. The way that Callie was about to reconcile with Yama, but was prevented from doing that because of a failed transference, which left her in the mind of a disabled child. Yama and Sam having to leave the place that they worked so hard to save, or depending on your interpretation, just disappearing into the crowds. And that which was so great and wonderful, like even the gods, they had a majesty to them, but now they are gone, and it's just humans left, fighting amongst themselves. All of these reasons, I think it's a spectacular ending. I don't like happy endings of stories. I don't like terrible endings of stories either. This hit a nice sweet spot. I do think there are a few weaknesses here in some sense, because at the end, as we said before, the gods were at their weakest point, and their victory was basically assured in one way or the other. Whoever won, Sam was going to be the victor, because humans would have triumphed over whoever between Nirti or the gods themselves. The humans would have eventually overthrown them. So there was kind of a lack of tension there, although this isn't a very tension-filled story in the first place. And I also think it was a little bit rushed. I would have liked a little bit more development in the present storyline, quote unquote. But these are tiny nitpicks. It's still a masterpiece. And yeah,
See,
chapter 7, I really liked it.
That's really funny that you felt a diminishment of tension, because I felt an enhancement of tension from three sides that are like all allyable but aren't, and they're all actively fighting each and every one of each other. That's just open for so many different ways for a conflict to go than, oh, one side wins. Like a standard two-sided conflict is a lot less interesting to me.
Right, but what happens in the story is basically what they set up is going to happen at the beginning of the chapter, right? Sam and his people are talking, and they're like, okay, if we support this person, then they're going to win, and X is going to happen, and then Y is going to happen. And that's just what happens. It stays very true to that. There's no gotcha twist that happens, for example.
So it wasn't until the book was over, I was so certain the first time I read it that Yama and Sam were going to have a throwdown in chapter 7. I was certain they were going to have a huge fight, and it never happened. I mean, so that was my tension. I was certain that Yama and Sam were going to have a fight. It never happened.
I thought there was going to be a betrayal more consequential than Taraka's in chapter 7. And that
I thought Taraka's would be more consequential itself.
Yeah, right?
He just kind of shows up and Yama's like, nah, you dead.
And who didn't see that coming, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So what did you guys think about? So what did you guys think in chapter 7 where Yama, he's like, oh, hey, give me some time. I can make a... And then he starts giving all these descriptions of these fantastical science fiction weapons.
Yes.
Oh, I love
it. Which is just in the middle of a fantasy book. I'm going to make a Gehenna gun with all this weird stuff. Anyways, I thought that was...
And the fountain shield with sprays of cyanide and dimethyl sulfoxide. And I was like, I understand how that would work.
Yeah.
And that is that's something that like the KGB would use.
Yeah. I love Yama and his wildly unethical mad scientist instruments of war.
He's the god of death.
Yeah.
Complete with Vasty Hall of Death.
Man, the names of the rooms in Celestial City are messed up.
The Pavilion of Silence with its rooms of heartbreak, despair, and memory loss.
Don't forget Rape.
And dust. Rape was a different building.
Yeah, Rape.
Okay.
The Rape was in the palace of the thief, the god of thieves.
I'd feel very scared going to that one.
Yeah, I would too. And did you like the game of Irish Stand Down being played by one of the gods?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, Kubera?
By Kubera. Yeah. They're like, Irish Stand Down.
That was fantastic.
I love... So we've talked a little bit about Sam, tearing down the tension a little bit and making it a little bit more modern. I love when Sam spits fire every time in this book because he is hilarious. So
he does spit some good fire, but my favorite, I think, quote relating back to that previous discussion we were having, I finally found it, is at the end of chapter 7 when Sam is talking to Renfrew, Neriti. He says, "This is only one world, Renfrew. Who knows what goes on elsewhere? And that isn't really the fight I wanted to win anyhow. You know that. I'm sorry for you, and I'm sorry about the whole thing. I agree with everything you said to Yama, and so do the followers of the one they call the Buddha. I don't recall any longer whether I was really that one or whether it was another. But I am gone away from that one now. I shall return to being a man, and I shall let the people keep the Buddha who is in their hearts. Whatever the source, the message was pure, believe me. That is the only reason it took root and grew." So I think that lends some credence to Sam at least partially believing in Buddhism.
I never said he fully denied Buddhism. I just don't think that he was the Buddha or embraced the, pacifistic side of
no.
Buddhism.
I mean, he clearly wasn't. Rild was, right?
I mean, until Rild almost fought the Death God.
Well, but
What a very un-Buddha thing to do.
Yeah,
no,
but
the way that Sam explained that though,
exactly.
it felt like a parable.
I know, it really did.
Go ahead, Kieran, explain that. I love that too. So
it's gorgeous. No, I remember it now.
So Yama comes back from defeating Rild, and Yama is the biggest, baddest MRFer in the land, and he could defeat anybody. And he comes to talk to Sam, and Sam is just calm and serene and Buddha-like after a weird dream sequence. And he's like, this guy, he couldn't have been Buddha because he fought me. And he's like, so, yeah, do you know this Rild guy? Yeah. He said, has Rild seen you fight? Yeah. So Rild knows that you are, the strongest. Rild knows that you can do anything. So what he did was he chose to sacrifice himself, knowing that he couldn't beat you. And that is even more Buddha.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was a beautiful bit, I'm not gonna lie. And I also liked how Sam defeated Yama in a very Buddha way by trapping him in quicksand and then getting his monks to take him out. What a perfect way of doing that.
Yep. Sam did nothing to Yama.
Exactly.
Didn't lay a finger on
Yama.
In terms of dialogue, and this may be a good segue. I love how Sam, he's he was a troll before trolls existed. And I'm thinking specifically of the part where he's talking to Brahma. Oh, hey, yeah, do you like having those man parts? Oh, you're pretty manly there, aren't you? And it gets him so worked up that he admits that he was a she in the past. And he's like, I'm just kidding. Don't worry about it. And
this is how men talk to each other, don't you know?
Right.
I'm sure you have friends. This is just how men. Yeah. And he straight up gaslit her.
100%. 100%. And I love how Sam he did it in the chapter before where he just provoked Yama, and he goes out of his way to provoke people to get a response.
Yep. Sam dead named somebody in the chapter. Mm-hmm. He referred to Brahma as Madeline. Which this is not a clear trans allegory, but it basically is, and I want to talk about that now. How problematic to a modern reader that would be. Brahma was previously assigned female at birth and went by the name Madeline, and Sam just straight up says, "Hey, Madeline, you were nice to catch up." And Brahma goes, "How could you know? How could you know?" And Sam was like, did the classic, "Well, I didn't know till you said that," which is, Jade City did that too. That's been done. But that's not what impresses me. But the use of a dead name, the insulting language, the use of psychological trauma to unsettle someone, the gaslighting, and just willful malice in that exchange is both excellent writing and very troubling personal behavior.
Yeah,
and
very troubling behavior
very troubling behavior for our protagonist to do in a manner that makes you personally makes me question him more. But I think that the effect in 1967 would have been, this is a queer villain and Sam is our straight protagonist and they're going to fight, and spoiler, eventually Sam is going to kill Brahma. And I can't look at that and not say that there's problematic things there.
I think it was meant to be funny. What the interaction between him and Brahma, which you could definitely say was problematic. I agree. I think in a lot of ways this could be revised if it was done today. But I think it was still done well enough that it's not like we need to go out calling for Zelensky's head. Not that I'm saying that that's what you're saying.
No, that
That's
is
my
not
two
what
cents.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
I will disagree. But go ahead, Huron.
I'm not trans, so I don't know what it's like. But I mean, Brahma's an asshole, and Sam is trying every way to piss him off, and he did pretty well. I mean, are we going to say that Brahma didn't deserve it? Because I mean, he's a really bad guy.
The morality of the situation is greatly improved by the fact of Brahma being an actual immortal tyrant. Yes.
And that's problematic in itself. But I mean, in context of the story and Sam and Brahma, I got no problems there. I can talk about though that the other Brahma was also
queer-coded
once a
and
woman.
queer villains is another problem we can discuss later. But
especially in the 1960s, right?
Go ahead, Huron.
Yep.
Even now. But the second Brahma too was also once a woman. Although the situation was very different, right?
Yes.
I don't know.
I'll to pick up on Huron's point. The fact that Brahma, the first Brahma, was originally a woman, and evidently she wanted to be a man, was unintentional in this book, because people in this story wear bodies like we wear clothes. They just cycle through them. For example, the god of thieves, Ratri, he alternates, or he or she alternates.
I don't think that's Ratri. Ratri is god of night.
It's Helba, I think, right?
Helba.
Helba, yeah.
Helba is the god of thieves.
Thank you for the correction. Yeah. So one first-bodied man, then switches over to female, then male, then female. That's said explicitly. And he does it to confuse people, or he or she, however you want to name them, does it to confuse people. Kali, to Huron's point, becomes Brahma, but she doesn't become Brahma because she wants to be a man. She does it for power. She does it for the stability. So, I take your point. Like, again, like Huron, I'm not trans. I'm not LGBT. So if you see something that we don't, I'll defer to you. But I saw a playing of the aspects of identity, which is what I think Zelazny was going towards. Like, what is somebody's real identity? Like, who are you truly? Does your body matter, or is it something else? And for Brahma, the first Brahma, it was her body. But for other people, it was not necessarily that.
I think also a problem with Brahma, is that
that's okay, go.
Brahma is a very, very, in Hindu mythology, Brahma is the god of masculinity, basically. So they take on all the aspects of masculinity, I suppose, whatever that means. And as a man, I found it kind of offensive, actually. But like, he has a harem. He's just an a-hole. And the fact that it once was a woman means that she was taking on this identity, thinking that that's what being a man is, which I suppose from a 2020 lens is even an extra layer of problems.
I will give it to Zelazny in that I think he wrote a trans character very believably. But it is, I think that Madeline, or Brahma the First, is, or Brahma the First of this book. There were Brahmas before Madeline, and there are Brahmas after. Was specifically written to be trans, was specifically written to have always wanted a male body and to have finally achieved it through the miracles of science, but then to have also afterwards been unhappy and feeling like an imposter, even in the physical body. And I think that is, there's the clearest analogy to it in modern parlance and taxonomy would be a trans character. And that this trans character has failed in becoming a good person or in becoming what they wanted to be. If I was reading this in a modern book, I would want there to be at least one clear example where there was a trans character who succeeded, and to show that it was an individual failing on this one character's part, not of, as is said by a couple of people in this book, like basically an inalienable quality of the soul which carries gender over between transfers.
Yeah, I was nodding the whole way. I agree completely. And I think especially if they had other trans characters that were not going through these problems, it would not be a problem. Um, and you said that her problem was
Because
that
we
she
we
always
do
had
not see characters change sex very often. We see them change bodies, but we do not see them change sex very often. Yes, Era.
Kip, I have a question for you. When Kali changed from female to male, it ended the relationship with Yama. How would you have felt if what would your feelings have been if it had been decided that Yama would stay with Kali?
I would have loved that. But I don't, because they said specifically that all marriages are ended upon transfer, no matter like what the circumstances. So that's kind of like new body, new life, which is a societal thing which I can respect on its own. Star Trek does a very similar thing with the Trill. Like, you're encouraged not to carry over relationships between hosts. So like that's something that I don't have a problem with at all. But I would have liked more mentions of like, oh, most people having been one or both or other sexes in their lifetime. Like, oh yeah, last life I was a woman, and like therefore I'm considerate. But it definitely seemed like cross-sex transfers were an unusual thing in this world.
I got a question for y'all. How do you think, assuming we're moving on, I think that we're okay, right?
Okay, yeah.
How do you think Zelazny handled the portrayal of the three major religions in Lord of Light? Um, I know very little about Hindu, but I am a Christian, and I know quite a bit about Buddhism, just living around Buddhist and studying Buddhism. And as far as Buddhism is concerned, I think it was portrayed very well. But I wish one of us were Hindu or had more information there. But what do you guys think?
I think Buddhism was portrayed pretty well. I think Hinduism was portrayed pretty well, and I love the way that Christianity was portrayed because it was horrible.
I love that the only thing that the Christians do in the story is go on a crusade.
and have zombie followers.
There were one and a half Christians. One was a fascist, and the other one was forced into it.
Yeah.
So this is actually a Zelazny thing. So Lord of Light focuses on Hinduism, Buddhism. He has another book, Preachers of Light and Darkness, that follows Egyptian mythology. He has another book, Lord Demon, which follows Chinese mythology. So he is constantly playing with these tropes in different religious venues all the time. He's always mixing the mythological with the modern, with science, over and over again in every book. So he's always exploring these themes. I can't speak to whether one is better than the other. I'm Jewish, so he knock on wood, he didn't touch my religion in any of the books, but to the extent that it looks like it was well done.
I don't know. It seemed like. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was about to say, and I'll go back to the original point I made of. He does make a point. He makes a very strong point throughout the book that it's the message, not the messenger. He really, really does. So to the extent that Buddhism is your thing, I think he does a credible job of saying, hey, look, here it is.
If in a lot of ways, it felt like he was taking pot shots at Hinduism to me. The story starts out. I suppose he would say that in any religious power structure, it just kind of turns into a theocracy and fascism. But since it starts out with Hinduism and all of these gods are not good guys, I mean, as they start losing power, more and more defect to the other factions. But these people are not good. They're keeping the masses from, I don't know, ascending, I suppose you could say. And they're fighting with one another. They're bad aspects, in my opinion. I just, like I said, I'm not Hindu, so I'm not gonna like take offense for them. But it seemed like he was just, I don't know, not very respectful.
I think the issues with the Hindu religion in this book come not from flaws within the belief itself, but from the flaws within the gods, because they aren't the actual incarnations of these different aspects of God. They are humans who have stolen basically the mantles that they are wearing and lied to everybody about what they are. So I think it's respectful to Buddhism. Sorry, not Buddhism. Hinduism in that it's not portrayed as this is the religion is the problem. It's the gods who are in charge of enforcing the religion that are the issue here.
I agree with you, but I think that so there are obvious parallels to the caste system in India, right?
Yes.
And I think
I don't think you can call them parallels. They just are.
Okay. It's the caste system in India, right? And it feels like to me that whether it's true or not, that Zelazny is equating their religion with their societal problems, and maybe it's true, but I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Here,
I think it's not equating the religion with the societal problems. It's equating the people who control both of those things. The people who control the society and the people who control the religion, those are the corrupt forms.
That's probably part of my problem. Oh, go ahead.
But let me be the old person in the room. When the book came out, which unfortunately I can remember, there wasn't internet.
What are you, 70?
Right? I'll be 50 at the end of the year. So when the book came out, there wasn't internet. So the mere fact that he even talked about Buddhism or Hinduism in American culture in that time period was enough. I mean, it was enough. Like, what is this? Then you have to go to the library, go look it up, go find somebody who knows something about it. That's how you would learn it back then. Nowadays, you just hit Google, go on the computer, and boom, and you're done.
Yep.
So we just have so much more information at our fingertips now that it's, in some ways, it's hard to put yourself in the mindset of the culture in which the book was originally written. And I think we need to make some allowances for the fact of, for many people who are reading this book for the first time in that era, this was their very first exposure to any of these religions except Christianity.
I think that's an excellent point. And Ashaman was reminding me that it's really just the power structures of people in control. And as a Christian, I had no problem with the zombie lord, because first of all, he's badass, and second of all, because he seemed to me to, especially in 1960, because I mean, America's just everyone knows Christianity, that they don't need positive representation or whatever. But a lot of it felt to me that he was just a symbol of Christian fascism, and I could separate myself from that, So what I'm saying is, I guess what I've been saying for the last 10 minutes is kind of moot point because I'm not Hindu.
Did anyone go and look up what the Lokapalas are? Because that word was unfamiliar to me back when I first read this. It's the collection of 4 Hindu gods, which are the guardians of the 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. And so, like, that's the Brotherhood, and that Sam joins at the very end. That's like, it's the Lokapalas. They split from heaven as a group, minus Agni, who at that point is just like being continually replaced because all the Agnis die. Kind of a running joke in heaven at that point. And at the very end, when Sam gives his blessing to Nariti, he, as Gautama, he gives a blessing which involves the wind and the cardinal directions, and it's blending his status as the one of the Lokapalas with his identity as the Buddha, and I really like that moment as well because it added even more ambiguity into Sam's ending.
I think we should also note that the number of chapters is also significant in Buddhism too. The number 7.
Sacred 7.
So it's this. Zelazny was very deliberate in his symbolism as it relates to Buddhism in this book. I mean, I think he made a special care to develop it in every way he could, both in his writing, in his characterizations, and the number of chapters and everything he did in this book.
And do you think you need to understand all of that symbolism in order to appreciate the book?
No, it's a badass book.
You could enjoy the book just on a level 1 because it's cool. It's really cool.
Yeah. As a first time reader, and I haven't reread it yet, unfortunately. That's where I was living for most of the book, just trying to figure out exactly what was going on, what everything meant. You know, as you do when a fantasy book starts, you kind of thrown into the middle of things, and you have to figure things out, or you're gonna.
Especially when chapters 2 through 6 do not follow chapter 1.
Yeah, that threw me for a loop at first. But even then, like, he gives you so much level 3 without you even consciously being aware of it, that this book, I almost think it can't exist as purely as level 1 story, because there's just so much to it, and he writes it so well, and he delivers it so well to you that you're going to get level 3 stuff whether or not you're looking for it.
Yeah, each chapter starts out with a real life religious text.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great. Good point. So Ash, this is your first time reading it. Would you have wanted more books? Would you have wanted it to be a whole series instead of 7 chapters?
7 books written like this, I would take. I'm not sure if I would want this particular story. That's I think a conversation you could get very deep into. But I really appreciate that this was a short story. Basically,
it's a full-length novel, but
it's a full-length novel, but it is short in the terms of the epic fantasy we get nowadays. Like,
it is
1,000-page door stoppers and stuff like that.
Very fast-paced too.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this book is perfectly written, and the length, I think, is perfect for it, basically. But you know what? If I could read more of this, I would.
Read it again.
I think part of the genius of this book, or Zelazny, is that he does just enough to get your imagination going, and then you're working at it like, oh wow, what about, and then he stops, and he lets your imagination do the heavy lifting. He doesn't describe everything for you. He makes your imagination work for it. So, and that's one of the things I like the most about how Zelazny writes.
Yeah, reading this after reading someone who filled all of their scenes with so much internal dialogue was a breath of fresh air.
Not a
the amount that is left to the reader to interpret, it really respects the reader. And
yes.
I appreciate that.
I love it when a book respects the reader's intelligence and actually makes you work and invest in the story. I think a lot of that is lost in modern storytelling. It's a lot more, I don't want to say spoon-fed, but spoon-fed to you. Yeah. He tosses you in. He doesn't outright explain a lot of things. He makes you figure things out from context and along the way. And if you don't understand everything right away, you know what? That's fine. You'll get there. And
he almost never puts you into a character's thoughts. He almost never goes for that shortcut.
That's right.
Sometimes he can tell sometimes he can like tell that a sex scene is about to happen off screen just by like some dialogue.
Imagine that.
The way he writes those amazing. Like, there's a few times I made notes and I think it's like, is this sex? And then I think about it like, oh yeah, it's sex.
It's sex.
I love his prose. It's beautiful and it's subtle and it's very invoking of old religious tales, and I of course that's on purpose, but it's beautiful. I love it.
Were you guys
So
thrown off at all? I'm sorry. Were you guys thrown off at all by the fact that you went from this really beautiful prose, and then the very next sentence it's something completely modern vernacular?
No,
I loved it.
The
I
juxtaposition.
loved it.
That was my
He
favorite
wove
part,
those.
so.
He wove the two styles together so well. It was flawless. A less skilled author would have been really jarring, but
Yeah,
the way he wrote it was incredible.
Someone who does that very well also is Kai Ashanti Wilson, a more modern author, who does some excellent code switching in Sorcerer of the Wild Deeps and A Taste of Honey. You guys can check those out if you like. But no, it's masterful. The weaving of the formal narrative structure with the modern vernacular of the dialogue.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Yeah.
Who is your favorite character?
Yama, for sure.
Yeah, Yama as well. That guy's awesome.
Real Sugata.
I liked Tak.
Oh, why do you like Tak?
He kind of felt like the everyday man, and I liked his. I liked how close he felt to Sam, despite not knowing him well. He was the first character whose head we were in at the beginning of the story. It's like on page 2. Yama, and who was with Yama when they woke in Sam?
Realtree or
Ratri.
Ratri. So Yama and Ratri wake him up. They're like, "Oh, welcome, Mahasamatma, welcome." They give him all these religious titles, and Tak's like, "Oh, hello, Sam." And
Yeah,
Sam just
and he
felt
responded
like
to Tak, but not to them.
Yeah, Tak just felt real in a way that the other characters felt like gods.
Tak, I'm pretty sure, is designed to be the avatar of humanity in this story. Tak is the one who gets affected by the consequences of the gods, but really can't do all that much to defend himself from them.
And not to his fault at all.
No, not to his fault at all. And so Tak going off to finally have adventures and no longer be just like in this nepotistic position of Master of the Archive where he has no real job. I really liked that ending for Tak. I like that it's a start. It's a beginning. Yeah.
Is it worth mentioning the fact that Tak is an ape through most of the book? Not
sure.
actually human, but actually an ape. What do you guys think that has? I mean, I agree with everything you guys said, but what about the fact that his body, he's in an ape's body for the majority of the book? Does that mean
specifically until Sam wins?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it indicates the position of humanity existing in a lower state to the gods who exist as regular, well, not regular, but humans. And Tak is trapped in an animal's body, which most of the humans are essentially done as well. Some are literally trapped in animals' bodies and forced to spy on people.
And especially in that first chapter, it's really driven home just how important both him in his ape's body is and his relationship to the rest of the gods that he is among. Like it is left academic. The point, if a man could fit through one of those windows, the point is an ape could. And then
he wants to be helpful as an ape.
Yep. And this image also stayed in my mind of Tak outside on that windowsill, like with just reaching one paw in the wet rain, while Ratri was inside sitting on the windowsill, and just like the hem of her scarf was getting wet. And that was all the consequence the rain had for her. Like the little bit of the scarf she didn't care for and clearly just draped outside the window. That was affected, but Tak was getting soaked. And I thought that was probably the most stark example for me of his place in the world at that moment.
Does anyone else feel that we could do an episode on each chapter?
Yeah.
Oh, I did suggest it, not entirely as a joke. I really did. And it deserves that kind of examination. It deserves that kind of talk. I don't know if it deserves it from us, but it does deserve it.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Yep. So we're about to wrap up. We've been going for about an hour. Actually an hour and 10 minutes about. So final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Everybody read this book. Read it now if you at all interested in fantasy or sci-fi. This is not dated. It is, in my opinion, worthy to be mentioned in the same sentence as Shakespeare and the Odyssey. Perhaps not quite as influential, but certainly of the same quality.
Yep. For my final thought, I will say that this book was once used as as a cover story for a CIA infiltration, which I think Eradandis really wants to tell more about. So I can't hear Eradandis right now. So, but yeah, it was used. They said that they were going to be shooting a movie for Lord of Light. They used this as a screenplay, and they were able to get hostage crisis out of Iran, I think. It was immortalized later in the award-winning film Argo, with Brad Pitt, right? I'm just going to look this up. Yeah, it was subsequently acquired by the CIA's cover for the Canadian Caper, the exfiltration of 6 U.S. diplomatic staff trapped by the Iranian hostage crisis in Tehran. And
Fantastic.
they
This
said
book
that
deserves that kind
they
of
said they
story.
were scouting a location for shooting of the film adaptation of Lord of Light, and unfortunately, that doomed it never to actually have a film adaptation.
I think this is pretty unfilmable, though. I'm not sad that there's no film of this.
Still my final thoughts. I'm out. So
Yeah, read this. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, read it. There was going to be a $50 million budget for the film back in like the 70s. So
Wow.
yeah,
My final thoughts
read it.
are: read it. It's great. Take notes. I think you could read it again and again and again and get something new. We've said everything we can say. There's nothing but praise. Well, nothing but praise.
And if you do
I
read
have
it,
a little
please...
bit of criticism, but
Yeah, exactly. That's why I stopped myself. I'm trying to phrase it correctly.
I did have a little bit of criticism.
it was fair.
Yeah, I still think
It's
this
great.
warrants like a 4.999 out of 5, something like
Sure.
that.
I'm willing to forgive things that I don't like if the good stuff was good enough.
I'm willing to forgive things written in the 60s for not being completely up to date on modern ethics. But
I love H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah, same.
do you love him or do you love his books?
Jewish. Hello.
Whatever.
Okay.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
To wrap this up, if you do end up reading this, which we highly recommend, please join us on Reddit, on Patreon, on Discord, and please feel free to talk to us about the conversation in our Green Team discussion channel. And it was lovely to have all of you here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
Music is Galactic Damages by Jingle Punks.